The goal of couples therapy is to keep the couple together, right? It's kind of like, let's take them from miserable and fighting to okay enough that they'll stay together. That's the goal.
"83% of Americans identify as not very happy, which can hold you back and negatively affect your relationships and your business. On this podcast, we discuss the proven steps to happiness so you can restore balance and rekindle your joy."
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the How to Be Happy podcast. I'm Brad Chandler, your guest, and today we have Adele with us, and we are going to jump right in. Adele, how are you today?
I'm great, Brad. How are you doing?
Good. So we're going to talk about why your marriage sucks and what you can do about it, right?
Yeah.
So the first question is, why do most marriages suck?
Well, most marriages suck because you suck. And I know that can sound kind of harsh. What I mean by that is that if you're not a happy, healthy individual, it's impossible to have a happy, healthy marriage.
That is the truth. I can remember before I went through my transformation, a friend of mine who got me into this whole thing said, "Brad, no wonder you've been divorced twice. There's no way you can have a happy relationship the way that you think about yourself."
Wow.
So tell us more about that. What is it that, if we look at the divorce rates, right? I think the first divorce rate now in the United States is around 50%, give or take a couple of percentages. The second divorce rate is 60%, and the third divorce rate is 72%. So my first two marriages, it was just like, well, they're the problem, right? So what did I do? I just went and found another there, and guess what? I reenacted the same exact problems, right?
Yeah, not surprising. Yeah, totally. I mean, one thing that was like really, I already knew this, of course, but what was really illuminating for me when I did my conscious uncoupling training is that unless we do our own work, right, and start to take responsibility for what went wrong the first go round, and we always have some responsibility, even if it appears that the other person is all to blame. That's never the case. Unless we take responsibility and start to change those things, we're just going to repeat it again. And that's what you saw happening.
And isn't our brain actually doing its job when we're repeating things to a degree, or at least our survival brain?
Yeah, I mean, what we both learned in our rapid transformational therapy training, right, is that if we've survived something, our brain thinks, "Oh, great, I've survived. So this is what I should keep doing, right? Because I'm still here."
Yeah. So your subconscious brain, its only really role in your life is to keep you alive. It doesn't care if you're happy or sad. So what does it do? It says, okay, well, you just went through this trauma. This certain person caused you the trauma, but you're alive and that's all I care about. So let's go out and find another person just like her or just like him. And that's why you see, I mean, you work with people in their 50s and 60s, and it's just one bad relationship after another, right?
Right. I mean, either that or they, I'm frankly thinking about my mother right now. People just give up completely. They just think, oh, well, I'm not cut out for relationships, or, oh, well, all women are crazy, or all men are whatever. That I see that a lot too.
And this is the way it has to be, right? I'm just going to live with it.
Yeah, I'm just going to live with it. Exactly.
Or I'm going to stick around for the kids. How about that one?
I'm going to stick around for the kids and just suck it up. And maybe when they go to college, or maybe when they get married, then I'll finally leave, and then I'll finally be happy. Yeah.
So I did I put out a daily transfer or a happy post, right, every day. And one of them was, it was taking what my mentor, Gabor Mate, said. How do you find out if you have a bad marriage? Well, you can ask the parents, or you can test the cortisol levels in the children. Because if you have a bad marriage, the cortisol levels in the kids, and what's cortisol? It's what your body produces when it's in stress, and it's not good for your body. Chronic cortisol will ruin you from a health perspective. So for the people who say I'm staying in this marriage because of the kids, they're not doing their kids any justice, right?
Wow, that's really interesting. I mean, I know I'm going to mispronounce
Gabor.
it, Mate,
Yeah.
I've read one or two of his books. I don't know his work as well as you do, but I've not heard that before about the cortisol in children. That's so super interesting. And it doesn't surprise me at all because I know I was a health coach before I became a relationship coach. That stress is like it's hugely important in terms of your overall health and well-being. So yeah, staying for the kids just doesn't work. I mean, I do think that people can use the kids as a motivator for
Yeah.
improving your marriage for sure, and that's a great motivator to have.
I tell people all the time when they're thinking about, do they want to do the work? Do they want to get freedom? You've got to go through the truth, which is often painful. And a lot of people don't want to do that. And I say to them quite frequently, you brought your kids into this world. They didn't ask to be brought into this world. You have a responsibility to them to stop this multi-generational curse that we're all involved in. It didn't start with your parents. Didn't start with your parents' parents. There's no one to blame. This was all, they didn't wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to screw up my kids, right? This was passed down generation after generation. If you're a parent and you're thinking about, should I do the work? Should I change my ways? You owe it to your children to do the work, right?
100%.
So,
100%.
so who is Adele? Adele helps people struggling with relationships make the decision to stay or go without therapy. She's also a certified conscious uncoupling coach and a rapid transformational therapist. So what does that exactly mean? Rapid transformational therapy. What is that? And then tell us just quickly what the conscious uncoupling is.
Well, rapid transformational therapy, as Brad well knows, because I hope this is okay to say, you just got certified in this too. So rapid transformational therapy it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a method for completely transforming really anything in your life, but basically your old outdated beliefs that are keeping you stuck in life. And you can do that really rapidly, right? That's kind of the magic of it. You don't have to sit around in therapy and for years talking about your childhood. You can do it really quickly.
Yeah, so I think traditional therapy works for some, but it doesn't work for most. And I think one of the reasons is because it focuses on the conscious mind, and your mind, your behavior is not driven by your conscious mind, or maybe it's 20%. Most of your behavior in a day, when you're yelling at your wife and kicking the dog, it's your unconscious mind. And so until you tap into that, and RTT, rapid transformational therapy, uses hypnosis to tap into the subconscious mind. So that's why they're able to see people, including myself, who went through 30 years of therapy, literally change in a matter of hours because we're able to get to the subconscious mind who knows all the reasons for all your problems, right?
It's amazing. I once used a graphic. I'm sure a lot of people have seen this used for other things. Sorry, someone's knocking on my door. Besides rapid transformational therapy, which is that the image of an iceberg, and there's only like a teeny bit sticking above the water, and the rest of it's submerged. So that I've actually heard it's only 5%. That 5% of the iceberg sticking above the water is like your conscious mind, and then everything else is your subconscious. And that stuff in your subconscious mind has been running on repeat for like decades.
Yep, it's ingrained, programmed into us.
And it's so important you got to get in there and reprogram all of that stuff that's been in there for all those years. Otherwise, that little 5% of your conscious mind, I'm not saying it can't, but has a very, very difficult time overriding all of that.
But the beautiful thing is you don't need years and years to reprogram it.
You don't.
And we're testament to that. So it's a beautiful thing. So tell us a little bit about, a lot of people in life talk about, I'll be happy when I get that next job. How does that apply to marriages when you're working with these couples? How does that apply, and how does it serve or not serve them?
This is a concept that I think is so important. And I actually was just starting to read a new book this morning, and I sent Brad some text messages about it. I was like, yes, this is like, it's in, if I can remember the guy's name later, I'll let you guys know. He just did a great TED talk about this. But this whole idea, we're given this whole idea our whole lives, that when we succeed at X, Y, and Z, when we make a certain amount of money, when we have a great relationship, that's when we'll be happy. But the conventional wisdom is when you have certain things, then you'll be happy, right? Especially relationships. But that's going about it the absolute wrong, most backwards way possible, because the truth of the matter is that unless or until you are actually happy, fulfilled, whole, healthy as an individual, it's almost impossible to have good relationships or success. I mean, even if you do, you'll find that it's temporary, right? That kind of high feeling of having something, right? Like when we first meet someone new, we all feel happy, but then inevitably we're challenged. And then when we're challenged, we're unhappy and we blame the other person for not making us happy.
Right. Or it's it's probably a whole topic for another conversation, or it's a codependency thing where you're not happy with yourself, but you think the other person brings you happiness and they really don't. And it may work for a while, but then it ultimately will fall apart.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
So do you believe, we talk a lot about childhood programming and how we reprogram it in RTT, rapid transformational therapy. Do you think our childhood stories affect our marriages and our relationships as adults?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that I was about to say it's the only thing. It's not the only thing, right? There are a lot of factors, but it's hugely important in terms of who we choose, why we choose them. And so what typically happens is we tend to repeat what we see, as children.
So did your childhood programming affect your marriage?
Oh my gosh. Yes. Did it ever?
How so?
And, I didn't see this clearly until, unfortunately, after I was already divorced and did my own work through conscious uncoupling and rapid transformational therapy. So what happens is, based on our childhood experiences, we form beliefs about ourselves. Okay, so the belief that I became aware of, and by the way, these are subconscious beliefs. We don't even realize we have them, right? Until we do something like RTT. The subconscious belief I became aware of is I don't matter. I don't matter. Therefore, what I want and need doesn't matter either. Okay. So once we have these beliefs, we create our whole lives and our whole marriages based on that belief. So do you want me to explain how that showed up in
Absolutely, please.
my marriage? So one of my chief complaints in my marriage is he doesn't care about what I want. Right? Whenever we would go do something, it was always the restaurant he wanted to go to. It was the music he wanted to listen to. And I would get really frustrated, right? But what I would tend to do is to give in to what he wanted. And I had done that over so many years that we'd established this pattern, right? Adele gives in and he would kind of win, right? Then I would get frustrated and I'd try to stand up for myself, but it wouldn't work because we had this long-standing pattern. So in my mind, he doesn't care what I want. But what really was going on is, because of my belief that I and what I want and need doesn't matter, I had been giving in over and over and over again for, 15, 17 years. And yeah, that started in childhood, 100%.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I have countless examples too of how I recreated the stories from my childhood. So we all do it. And that's why we find, and like you said, repeat the same things over and over again until you become aware. And it's really hard to become aware in traditional therapy because they don't get to the unconscious or the subconscious level.
They don't. I mean, when you went to therapy, did you ever talk about what your beliefs were?
Nope.
No. In fact, I remember, and I really liked my therapist, but I remember I went to a therapist for like 3 years, towards the end of my marriage. And I remember her saying, well, he doesn't make you happy. And that was like it. And then what I was supposed to do was like text him and ask him for things differently or, whatever. But I didn't get to the root cause of it, which was like my fundamental belief about myself.
Right. So my shirt that I'm wearing says, no one can love you like you can. So that goes back to your earlier comment about how we say, oh, when we find this person, we'll be happy. But really, no one can bring you happiness. And no one can love you like you can. And until you can love yourself, you can't love other people. You might be able to love your children, but you certainly can't love other people. And you certainly can't have a deeply connected relationship because you're going to be fighting for your worthiness. I did it twice in 2 marriages. And looking back, it's so obvious, why that didn't work.
Well, I guess a bigger question is, and you and I have talked about this somewhat some in the past. I guess this is a different podcast, but what do you actually mean by loving yourself, and what do you actually mean by loving someone else? Because people will argue, oh, but I love such and such, and so when we talk about love, are we talking about a feeling? Are we talking about our actions? Is this a combination? Like, what are we really referring to? And then how do you go about loving yourself? I think that's a huge question too.
Yeah. So my mom years ago had a friend that was a psychologist, and he did a study. He said that he believed 3% of marriages were truly happy. And why? I mean, why is that? Well, when you have a 30 to 70% divorce rate, there's a lot of people that don't get divorced and are unhappy, right? There was a study that I read during COVID that said 83% of Americans identify as not being very happy. And it all goes back to that childhood programming where you're talking about. We have beliefs that were formed through this childhood stress and childhood trauma. So in order to have a good relationship, you've got to find a way to reverse those stories. And that will give you the ability to have self-love and self-compassion. And in my opinion, self-love and self-compassion are the only two things that really can bring anyone freedom in this world.
Yeah. So when we talk about happiness, is that what we're talking about? Really, the love it, truly loving yourself unconditionally.
Yeah, I think that's if not all, that's a huge piece. So traditional marriage therapy, you and I have been to lots and lots and lots of marriage therapy sessions. How do they go? What's a typical marriage therapy session like, or has been for you?
Well, yeah, I saw, I think, 3 different marriage therapists in the course of my marriage, and they all had kind of different strategies. But if I look at the common thread, first of all, it seems that, I mean, this is pretty obvious, but that the goal of couples therapy is to keep the couple together, right? It's kind of like, let's take them from miserable and fighting to okay enough that they'll stay together. That's the goal, right? And so the way that these people go about it, to me, looks like, kind of some Band-Aids, right? Like, let's repair this gaping hole, or let's slap a Band-Aid on it so they'll stay together. So the methods I saw ranged from like a therapist who just kind of listened to us, throw insults at each other. Of course, that doesn't work. That's just kind of like picking at a scab, right? I had another therapist who would actually, this was fairly useful, focus on communication techniques. And we learned how to communicate great. But then the question is, what are you communicating? Right? Like that's not getting to anything. But I did learn some handy techniques. So I just see that, like, first of all, I think the goal is misguided. I think the goal should actually be to create happy, healthy individuals first, by doing the things we're talking about, right? And then to work on creating a happy, healthy relationship.
Because, and we're going to touch at this at the end of this podcast, like, you can't have a successful, deeply connected relationship if you don't have a successfully, deeply connected relationship with yourself, right? So my experience with all these, I mean, I went for years and years, I don't know, 30 sessions, 50 sessions. And I can remember a lot of times leaving there saying, we just should get divorced. Like, it was worse leaving than going in, because it was like, well, do more date nights and repeat back what your spouse said, and, hold hands. And like you said, be better at communicating. None of that works when you don't have a relationship with yourself. So you can be the best communicators in the world, but if you're fighting for your value and your worth, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many date nights you go on. It doesn't matter how much sex you have. If you don't like yourself to some degree, it's not going to work. And you said earlier, like, what is love? Well, as I've gone through this the last 20 months and I've told people about the importance of self-love, and a lot of people are like, well, I love myself. And I'm like, oh, do you? Just like if you ask an alcoholic, are they an alcoholic? And they say no, or I don't know. I would ask, like, what does your life look like? How's alcohol affected all the different areas of your life? Well, it's the same thing. Do you have self-love? Do you have self-destructive behaviors? Are you smoking pot all day? Do you drink, 3 or 4 glasses of wine every night? Are you constantly in a stress situation? Do you constantly judge people? I mean, I could go on and on and on. Do you drink too much? Do you eat too much? Do you gamble too much? Any of those things are a clear indication that you don't have self-love. And in order to escape prison, you've got to know that you're in prison in the first place, right? I didn't know I was in prison 2 years ago. So if you're listening to this and you're like, well, I'm fine. Are you fine? Are your relationships great? Are you healthy? Do you eat right? Do you, not all those things? Do you take care of yourself? So anyway, fascinating stuff here. So we have made the point that traditional marriage therapy doesn't work. So what does work? What when we mentioned a couple of times, but let's wrap this up with a pretty little bow. What works? And if someone's struggling at their marriage, what should they do?
What works is becoming happy yourself. And like Brad and I were just saying, becoming happy is really, it's a result of your inner work, not what someone else is doing or something outside of yourself. So you really have to commit to doing your own work, and the kind of work that I like and that has really worked for me, and I know worked for Brad, is something different from traditional therapy. And I don't mean to totally bash traditional therapy. I think it can be a good thing. I just happen to really like the coaching model because, like I was saying before, traditional therapy is more about like trying to take something that's broken and kind of make it normal. That's more of like a medical kind of model, whereas coaching is like, hey, it's a lot more positive by nature. Let's help you thrive. So I happen to like that model, and I happen to really like coaching in combination with some deep subconscious work like RTT. And so what happens when you do that is you free yourself of all this junk and these old beliefs. When those old beliefs that are holding you back are gone, what's left? When you strip away all that stuff, what's left at your core is happiness. And you started off asking me about the marriage, so the real answer is you've got to focus on yourself as an individual. And I don't happen to believe that simply because you're happy as an individual that your marriage is going to work. I think if you're both happy as individuals and healthy, you have a pretty good chance. But I would never say that simply because you do your work and become a happy, healthy individual that your marriage is going to work too. I just don't think that's reality.
So I think you'd agree that a lot of therapy and addiction counseling focuses too much on the symptoms. And it's like having a physical pain is the same as mental pain. The only way that you can truly fix it and not mask it with drugs, the only way to truly fix it, right, is to go to the source of the pain.
Absolutely.
And how do you go to the source of the pain? It's buried in your subconscious mind. So that's why we use the tactic of hypnosis to get into the subconscious mind to figure out what are these stories that you're telling yourself that's driving your behavior that you don't even know. Because what we do as human beings, we talked about the multi-generational curse, and that if you're a parent, you really owe it to your kids to break this cycle forever, is that an unwhole person doesn't go and marry an enlightened monk, right? They go find a broken person too, because that's how they survive and that's how their brain works. And then they create unwhole offspring. And I've been a single dad for 11 years. And I was the dad who was at every single sporting event. Literally, last year, I was the only father who was at every single volleyball game my 15-year-old daughter had. I did everything for my kids. But yet I still, quote, messed up my kids to some degree because my subconscious behavior was driving my son to become a professional golfer. Because if he was a professional golfer, I might become worthy, and I wasn't worthy. So if you have if you're a parent listening to this and you have any of these, you drink too much, you eat too much, you judge people all the time, you're constantly irritated, you have anxiety, you have depression, you can be kissing your kids and giving them all the affection, showing up to all the sporting events you want. But if you think you're not negatively affecting them, you're wrong. And if you think that your bad marriage isn't negatively affecting them, you're wrong. How do you fix it? You fix it by fixing yourself. Adele can help you. I can help you. Our links are down there. If you work with us or not is of no concern to us, but go get help. And if you want something outside of traditional therapy where you don't show up every week and talk about the same shit over and over again, reach out to us. I mean, we've had a tremendous success in 3-4 hours of work. So do that. What else would you recommend? What would be the first step Adele, you'd recommend for someone who's like, yeah, I'm really struggling. What should I do?
The first step could be, reaching out to one of us, looking up what rapid transformational therapy is all about. I think that's a great first step. Buying a book, like one of Marissa Peer's book, who's the founder of RTT. I happen to also really love some other books that I don't know if you could put them in the chat or something like that. Brad and I are both huge fans of reading. We often talk about the books we've read. I think that could be a great first step, reaching out to one of us for sure.
Yeah. Tell Yourself a Better Lie is a great one by Marissa Peer. So anyway, Adele, that was fantastic. I hope everyone hope you got something out of this. If you found this helpful, please follow me. Please rate this podcast. Please write a nice description and give a 5-star review. And until next time, love heals all.
Hit subscribe if you don't want to miss out on more life-changing content. And if you're struggling, you don't have to. Go to bradchandler.com/contact. There, you can join the Facebook community of like-minded entrepreneurs, and you'll see a button to schedule your freedom and happiness call. See you on the next episode.